is a liar from the beginning. Satan is a murderer from the beginning. That's who he is. It's what he does. Satan is also a thief from the beginning. Just like Jesus said, you go read all this in the first couple chapters of Genesis, where Satan is introduced to us on the scene, the devil, the dragon, the serpent. He stole dominion from Adam. Adam yielded dominion to Satan. See, God created everything. He created the universe. He created the world. He created everything. And then he gave dominion to man. And he gave man the right to rule over everything that God had created. He made man the federal head over everything and said, Adam, you're in charge. I've created all this for you. You're in charge. I'm giving you one rule, one law. Do not eat from this one tree. That's all you have to do. The rest of it is easy. You could eat from all the other trees. He gave him a beautiful wife. He gave him ultimately a family. He didn't have any needs. There were no weeds. There was no thorns or thistles that grew from the ground. Everything that grew was beautiful. Everything that grew in the Garden of Eden was good for you and good for Adam. And he had dominion. Adam is our federal head, had dominion over all creation. But you see, Satan came and deceived Adam, and Satan took dominion from Adam because Adam, what did he do? He listened to the voice of his wife, who had listened to the voice of the serpent instead of listening and obeying the voice of God. See, God has a will, but we have a choice as to whether we're going to obey God's will or not. Whose voice are we going to listen to? That's my will. Oftentimes my will is in opposition to God's will, and I do things that are wrong. So do you. So it makes us humans. God gave dominion to Adam, and Satan came and deceived Adam and took dominion away from Adam because Adam, what? He obeyed the voice of the serpent instead of obeying the voice of God, and therefore he gave dominion of the earth over to Satan. And Satan has been the god of this world ever since. That's why there's earthquakes. That's why there's diseases. That's why there's cancer. That's why there's child molesters. That's why there's war. That's why there's rapists. That's why there's kids at 17 years old who take a AR-15 and go into school and mow his fellow students down. That's why there's Muslim suicide bombers who go onto buses and blow themselves up or take airplanes and fly them into trade center buildings, World Trade Center buildings, and kill innocent men, women, and children. That's why evil happens, guys. Because Satan is the god of this world. It's with a little g, according to the New Testament. A little g. He's not sovereign over the universe, but this little part of the universe, he took over management for this planet when Adam listened to his voice and disobeyed the voice of God. He's a destroyer. Since that time, after he lied to Eve and Adam, he brought murder, fratricide between Cain and Abel, and then he stole dominion. The thief, he stole dominion from man over this planet. He's a destroyer. He's destroyed nations. He's destroyed individuals to this day. That's not God's will, guys. God's heart breaks when things happen like that shooting in Texas or before that in Florida a couple months ago. God's heart breaks. He's not the author of evil. God doesn't do evil. He can't do evil. He can only do good. It's his nature. God is good. God is love. That's who he is. You know, Christians have so confused theology and convoluted theology that, in essence, what Christians do oftentimes is we give people the idea that God is responsible for evil, and when bad things happen, well, it's just the will of God, God's sovereign plan, that all these bad things would happen. Let's just look at the Holocaust. Because the Holocaust was perpetrated by Christians, at least so-called Christian nations. in Western Europe, primarily Germany, but not just Germany. The British have the blood on their hands as well. They weren't certainly, the British were not part of the Holocaust, but they turned their back on the Jews after the Holocaust. Only America sided with Israel when they needed a homeland after the Holocaust, after they were decimated throughout Europe. The British actually had ordered a video record, movie record. Matter of fact, Alfred Hitchcock flew over from America. I saw a documentary on this, very interesting, because they wanted to record the horrors of the Holocaust, of what actually happened, because people couldn't believe it at that time. People couldn't imagine what the Nazis were doing to the Jews. It was unbelievable. Matter of fact, to this day, there's still Holocaust deniers out there, aren't there? They don't believe it could be possible that somebody could be so evil, so horrible, so wicked, to kill men, women, and children by the millions just because they were Jewish. And so the the British government ordered that there would be a video catalog, that they would go in with modern movie-making equipment, sound equipment, and cameras, and they would videotape all of these concentration camps, some of the worst concentration camps out there, Birkenau and Auschwitz and so forth. And that they would then prove to the world for posterity that this actually happened. Of course, they were also preparing for the Nuremberg trials, when they were going to bring the Nazi leaders to trial for their crimes against humanity. And what happened was this, is during the couple of years after World War II had ended, 1945 into 46, 47, as they were making these movies and they were traveling and they were interviewing survivors and they were filming the concentration camps. They actually had film of the bodies, which you've probably seen pictures of. I've been to the Holocaust Museum, Yad Vashem in Jerusalem, and you see everything that's there. It's all recorded. The body stacked like cordwood, the testing that Mengele was doing, Dr. Mengele was doing on twins, Jewish twins, and so just horrible things, unspeakable, unthinkable things that were being done. What happened is the Jews needed a homeland right around this time. They were returning to Palestine, which they had called Israel Palestine at that time. Some people still do today. And they were going back to their ancient homeland. And the British began to oppose this. Matter of fact, they started taking the Jews that were coming from Europe, heading to Palestine, Israel, and they put them into concentration camps on the Greek islands. Some of them, they turned the ships around and sent them back to Europe. And they had nowhere to go. They had no homes. They were decimated. Most of their loved ones were killed. They lost everything. They were shell-shocked and suffering from PTSD from the trauma. And the British were opposing the Jews coming back to Jerusalem, back to Israel. Why? Because of oil. Because the Arabs said, if you want our oil, Great Britain, to rebuild after Europe was destroyed by World War II, you need to play nice. You need to do what we say. If you want our oil, you need to prevent the Jews from coming back to Palestine. And so what happened is the British buried these documentaries, these films, and they put them into storage and buried them in storage. They just recently came out in the last few years, after 70 years, 65, 70 years. The Americans, to their credit, actually filmed these things, and they did not bury them in the annals and the archives of some museum. They actually brought them here, and they were made public. But all of these were Christians who did this to the Jews. Whether it was the Roman Catholic Church or whether it was the Lutheran Church, the Reformed Lutheran Church, or whether it was just the German Protestant Church. And many of the Christians just simply looked the other way when they were rounding the Jews up. They did nothing to help them. There were a few. The righteous Gentiles are remembered in Israel, but you can number them in the hundreds compared to the millions of Christians who did nothing. And some of the Christians actually handed their Jews over for money from the Nazi regime. And so to this day, there are many Jews who will never talk to a Christian because they blame the Christians for the Holocaust because Hitler said he was a Christian. The Nazi regime said they were Christians. And they said they were doing the will of God by going after the Jews who were the Christ killers. What a tragedy. How evil. How terrible. Isn't Jesus the one who said, turn the other cheek? Isn't Jesus the one who said, love your enemies? Didn't Jesus say, Father, forgive them as he hung on the cross? They know not what they do. If Jesus was willing to forgive the Jews and the Romans who betrayed him and put him on the cross, who are we to want to exact revenge thousands of years later? You see, it's satanic. Satanic, done in the name of the church. How could we accuse God for these wicked acts? How could we blame God? How could we say this was God's perfect plan? As they took children and ripped them out of their mother's arms, and they had target practice with these babies. It's recorded they would throw the babies up in the air and shoot them with machine guns as they fell into the pits that they dug for the Jews to be buried in. Some of them buried alive. How could we blame God for this? Whether the Nazis claim to be Christians or not. It has nothing to do with Christ. And to this day, the Jews believe that the Christians are responsible for the Holocaust. What a tragedy. In Matthew chapter 13, Jesus explains where evil comes from, and it's not from God. God's not the author of evil, or serial killers, or rapists, or the Holocaust, or natural disasters. God's not the author of these things. Matthew 13, verse 24, Jesus is telling a parable, and he says this, the kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while men were sleeping, his enemy came and sowed tares also among the wheat and went away. But when the wheat sprang up and bore grain, then the tares became evident also. And the slaves of the landowner came and said to him, Sir, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? And he said to them, An enemy has done this. And the slaves said to him, Do you want us then to go and gather them up? And he said, No, lest while you are gathering up the tares, you may uproot some of the wheat with them. Allow both to grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest I will say to the reapers, First gather up the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them up, but gather the wheat into my barn. Now, the disciples came and asked him later, after he left the multitudes. It's recorded for us in verse 36. They said, Explain to us the parable of the tares in the field. They wanted to know, what does the parable mean? And he answered them, verse 37, and he said, The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man, speaking of himself, Jesus Christ. And the field is the world. And as for the good seed, these are the sons of the kingdom. And the tares are the sons of the evil one. Verse 39, and the enemy who sowed them is the devil. And the harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. Right there, Jesus explains where evil comes from in our world. Did you catch that? This ain't rocket science, guys. This isn't deep theology that you have to go to seminary to learn. It's very basic. Where does evil come from? It's not from God. It's from Satan. It's from the devil. He came and he sowed tares or poisonous weeds that look like wheat among the wheat fields. And he did it at night. And basically, the workers, the slaves of the landowner, wondered. Sir, verse 27, did you not sow good seed in your field? How then does it have tares? In other words, if you're good and you're a good king and you only do good, where does this evil come from that we see with our own eyes? Did you plant the evil? The answer is no. An enemy has come and done this. An enemy has done this. That's where evil comes from. It's from the enemy, guys. It's not from God. In Revelation 12:10, we're told that Satan is the accuser of the brethren. Not only is he called our adversary in the scriptures, we read earlier, but he's the accuser of the brethren. He's the one that accuses. He's the one that condemns. Not only does he accuse us, but he accuses God of being evil. He wants us to believe that God is behind the Holocaust, that God is behind what happened in Texas with that shooter, or Columbine before it, or the 9/11 attacks. He's the accuser of the brethren. He hates us, he hates God. He accuses us, he accuses God. He's a liar, but he's very, very good at what he does. He's been doing it for a long time. Matter of fact, Satan is the greatest theologian there is. Some have suggested that he sits on the board of most of the seminaries, the great seminaries of the world, of the West certainly, because of the evil influences that have taken over our seminaries. He's our adversary. You know the story of Job. It wasn't God that was hurting Job. It's very obvious. You go read the story. It wasn't God who was hurting Job. It wasn't God who was bringing evil on Job. It was who? Satan. He's named by name in Job chapter 1 and Job chapter 2. He took away Job's children, killed them with a windstorm or a tornado. He took away his wealth. He brought war against Job. His servants were killed. His livestock was stolen, wiped him out completely financially. And then he took his health. He touched his body and brought him sickness, where Job wishes he was never born. Job wishes he was dead. And what does Job's friends do when they come? They come and they say to him, well, if all these rotten, horrible, evil, wicked things are happening to you, you must be a horrible, evil, wicked individual. Because good things only happen to good people, and bad things only happen to bad people. And their theology was way out there. Some people still believe that today, that theology. That if bad happens to you, you must have some secret sin. There must be some evil hidden in your closet, skeletons that you need to deal with, and that's why bad things are happening to you. What skeletons did Jesus have in his closet, guys? Did bad things happen to Jesus? Continually. Did he have any sin? Did he have any secret sin? No. So bad things do happen to good people. And bad things happen to righteous people. And bad things happen to Christians. And bad things happen to God's people. And it should not surprise us. And we should not blame God for it. He's not the author of evil. As a matter of fact, when Job's friends and his comforters came to him, they basically said, God is doing this to you, Job. Instead of realizing that it was not God, it was Satan who was doing it, they said, God is doing this to you because you must be a terrible person. And poor Job, he was there saying, look, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I can't repent of anything because I can't think of anything that I've done that's wrong. I've tried to be a good man. As a matter of fact, he was a good man. That's the whole reason Satan began to pick on him. And God began to brag on him. Have you considered my servant Job a righteous man, a perfect man, is what God said. And then Satan came accusing and lying and saying, oh, well, if you just took away the things that you've blessed. Yeah, of course Job loves you, God, because look at how blessed you've made him. You've given him so much. But if you took all this away from him, then he'd curse you to your face. That was what was going on behind the scenes. As a matter of fact, in Job chapter 40, it's interesting because Job did, at the beginning of the story, Job basically said, well, we receive good from God and not evil. And he said, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. That's in Job chapter 1 and Job chapter 2. But then for the next 38 chapters of Job, Job complains against God. And he cries out to God, just saying, I wish I was never born. I wish I was dead. This is not fair. Why is this happening to me? As any of us would. Trying to figure out, why am I suffering? And at the end, God answers Job and says this in Job chapter 40, verse 6. Then the Lord answered Job out of the storm and said, now gird up your loins like a man. I will ask you, and you instruct me. Will you really annul my judgment? Will you condemn me so that you may be justified? This is a very important point God is making here with Job.